You have to understand the fire ladder. This tree was born in the same year as Jesus, and it was destroyed in a lightning fire in 2020 on a hot, windy summer day. And while many people wept over seeing these ancient giants shattered to the earth, nobody asked the obvious question. If redwood groves burn every few hundred years, how did these get to be 2,000 years old? What happened 2,000 years ago that allowed for these trees to become so robust? You see, trees don't burn easily. There's an inversely proportionate relationship between the density of a fuel and its probability of ignition. The hotter it burns, the more energy it takes to set it on fire in the first place. Heavy timber burns white hot when it ignites, but it ain't easy to get going. If you throw a match at a redwood tree, nothing happens. But throw a match into a patch of dry grass, and it goes up like tissue paper. Grass doesn't burn very hot, and thus it has a very high probability of ignition. Easy come, easy go. Fast-growing light fuels like grass don't burn hot enough to set heavy timber on fire. But grass does burn hot enough to ignite light brush. And light brush burns hot enough to ignite medium brush. And when medium brush gets into heavy brush, then shit really starts to boil. And thus you have the fire ladder. Ladder fuels are the progressively heavier and larger fuels that have enough energy release potential to carry a tiny spark from the ground to the crown of a 2,000-year-old tree. And once you have a crown fire, good luck.
We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live! Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live! Thing sucks!
Can a cigarette start a wildfire? That's the question of the day. Can a cigarette start a massive wildfire? Depending on who you ask, the answer is different, but you may want to light up a cigarette anyway because today's going to be interesting. Now, I don't want to bury the lead, but we're in a weird spot right now, right? And before I get into it, let me just ask a few questions. How do we verify what happened on the Palisades fire? How do we verify what happens on any fire? You might ask, how can you possibly determine the cause of a major fire, especially when it's ripping as hard as it did? What evidence is ever left over? Like, how could you determine if it were a cigarette? The cigarette would burn up entirely, right? How could you determine if it were even a firework? Because, you know, that the cardboard casings, yeah, they survived that initial burst from the firework, but could they survive a raging wildfire that goes on for several days? How do we know what happened? How do the feds determine what happened? Well, these are all the interesting questions. Now, we're at an interesting point with the Palisades fire. We're in a bit of a lull. And, you know, we had the 1-year anniversary. But we're in a danger zone right about now where people are losing hope. It's a tough spot, right? You would think that the anniversary is going to be a challenging day for a lot of people. It's not real, but it gives you this tangible reminder of what happened. And in a lot of ways, I think a lot of people feared the anniversary, but in a lot of other ways, the anniversary can be really cathartic. And so it's not always a bad time. Oftentimes it's a very productive time. Especially they had that rally. Spencer Pratt announced he was running for mayor. And by the way, if you live in the Palisades and you're not supporting Spencer Pratt, there's something wrong with you. Even on principle alone, even if you disagree with whatever his policies are, this man has sacrificed so much to fight for your community. And, as much credit as we give the attorneys, and they deserve it, Spencer has brought so much to the table. And he has fought for it. He's dealt with so much. He's been fighting for you for 14 straight months. The least you can do is throw him a vote. Okay? So I'm at a point now where, if you are a victim of the Palisades Fire and you're not supporting Spencer Pratt for mayor, you have Stockholm syndrome and you should get the fuck out. Okay? I have nothing else to say to you. But a few months after the anniversary, that's the danger zone. That's when the reality sets in. Things aren't really moving. There's a lull. There's not any information coming out with the lawsuit. And so it sort of feels like you're not making any progress. And even though there is some construction going on, most people are still stuck in purgatory. And it looks like there's no end in sight. And you look down the road, you look at Malibu Lake, and you'll see that even though Malibu Lake burned 8 years ago, there's still a bunch of burned out empty lots. And you have to wonder how much of the Palisades is going to look like that 8 years from now, and how much more of this can I tolerate? A lot of people who had to relocate, their kids are in a new school system, they're making new friends, they're getting established. You're not going to want to go back. And so right now, there are a lot of people who are starting to lose hope. And this is a really dangerous time. So please keep the residents of the Palisades in your prayers. I know there's not a lot of exciting information coming out. We got discovery coming. But all of this legal stuff there's a very slow process behind it, and it's not going to be satisfying in any way, shape, or form. It's going to take forever. So we got to have patience. However, there is some new stuff. We got legendary Dave Mills is telling me to quit smoking. He didn't tell me to quit smoking. He told me to just do it quickly. Dave, I will tell you, there are times I'm not a smoker, but every once in a while, I'll just light up a cigarette just to feel that smoke in my sinuses and in my lungs, because I sort of miss fire chasing. It's a weird thing, and those of you who've been on the fireland will understand it. There's something about that smell. Anyway, there's some new information coming out, okay? And we're getting it from two different sources. We have a new witness, or a witness offering new testimony, claiming something very profound that could disrupt the entire Palisades Fire case. I'm going to play you some video, and I'm not going to spoil it, but we'll discuss it afterwards. Now, there's also another source of information that's throwing a lot of elements of the Palisades Fire case in question, and that's the feds. If you guys recall, let me pull this up. What have I said since the outset about the commie arsonist? I warned, this was back in October. I said, absent a guilty plea, the feds are going to have a tough time nailing the commie arsonist for deliberately starting the 8-acre Lockman fire. Well, the commie just pled not guilty. Good luck, guys. Should have mopped up. Let's put aside the question of who takes custody of this fire. Is it the person who started it, or is it the LAFD? Because they obviously left it. They left it, right? Do I need to refresh you guys on what it is the general theory is? Should I? Let's do it.
I saw light smoke on the ground. I saw branches that were smoking still, and I could smell smoke. And there were, I would say, several smokers. In that immediate area, I'd say there was like a handful, like 5. But that's a lot to me. It's just an indicator that stuff's still hot.
So was there a containment line near where you first saw these smokers?
Nothing obvious. To me, it didn't look like there was a very good handline cut. Not a clean differentiation between burn and green. And there was a lot of unburnt fuel in the burn. I looked around, there were no other firefighters. Nobody. I was the only one. So I went around and I exposed a couple areas of different sizes, and that's where I noticed hot coals underneath the ashes. I could feel the heat coming off of it, and I didn't even want to use my gloved hand because it was hot. So I just kicked it with my boot to kind of expose it, and there was like red hot like coals that was still smoldering, and I even heard crackling. It needed some more thorough investigation and a little more thorough mop up, in my opinion.
Okay, so now that is the bombshell testimony of LAFD firefighter Scott Pike, a hero. He is the whistleblower who revealed to the world that he saw and identified and tried to extinguish multiple smokers and these ash pits that were left over after sloppy mop up. And the LAFD left that fire smoking. Now, when we come to the conclusion that this was a rekindle, what evidence do we have? What evidence could you have? Well, nothing really. There's no solid evidence short of someone filming the rekindle happening in real time. The only way that you can prove it's a rekindle is kind of by approximating it, right? You would have to rule out all of the other potential causes. That's the only way. You'd have to leave just one cause, because as much as all of the indicators would point to a rekindle, you've got here a firefighter saying, hey, we didn't mop it up properly. These things can easily rekindle within a week. That's not direct proof that it was a rekindle. It's evidence. It's very compelling evidence, but that's not proof. A lot of people conflate evidence with proof. But ultimately, if you want to prove that it's a rekindle or get close to proving it beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to eliminate the other things. Now, that would be lightning. That can be ruled out very easily. You would have to rule out lensing, right? Like a bottle. Like if there were a glass bottle there and it focused the sunlight in a way that ignited, okay, that's extremely rare, but they also ruled that out, right? What else is there? Power lines, they ruled that out. There's no power lines in the immediate area, not active ones. So they've ruled out basically everything except another arsonist. Now, I remember a lot of people, even when I was saying that this was a rekindle, there were a lot of people still hanging on, including experienced firefighters. I remember Dave Toussaint came after me quite a bit, saying that he still believes that there was a second arsonist the day of the Palisades fire on the 7th. Now, Board asks, are there any updates on what has happened to this firefighter? Is he still working? What I can tell you is that Scott Pike, after this came out, after his testimony came out, did he have any regrets? Absolutely not. And his reaction to all of this is what you'd expect from the caliber of man who you saw in that deposition. He said, this is the best thing I ever did in my life. Everyone is congratulating him, thanking him for his candor, calling him a hero. Exactly what everybody was calling for out of the LAFD for the longest time. Like, hey, just tell us the truth, man. Like, we're not going to bust your balls. Just tell us the truth. Finally, you have one man who had the courage to do that, and everyone's calling him a hero and thanking him. And he feels like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders. And in my opinion, he did a great mitzvah for the community. And this is the most compelling evidence that this was a rekindle, aside from ruling out everything. But have we ruled out a second arsonist? Well, we've got new witness testimony, not in the court of law, but on film, discussing how they think that our entire narrative about this being a rekindle is completely wrong. Shall we?
The biggest urban wildfire in American history left the Pacific Palisades, my hometown, a charred ruin. Our documentary revealed that the government's response has been riddled with errors and obfuscations. What if that incompetence extends to the question of how the fire started? Federal investigators have quickly coalesced around a consensus story. It goes like this. On New Year's Day, 6 days before the fire, at around midnight, 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht drops off his Uber passengers in the top corner of the Palisades. Then, Jonathan sneaks into the mountains and sparks dry brush. The resulting blaze spread 8 acres before being contained.
On New Year's Day, fire crews responded to an overnight blaze at a location near the Palisades.
Fire burned 8 acres, but didn't cause any damage to structures.
The embers from that fire were never fully extinguished. They lurk underground for 6 days, and then, on January 7th, strong winds blew away the topsoil. The embers escaped and burned down the town. This is the reignition theory of the Palisades Fire.
The January 7th fire could have been a reignition of a brush fire that occurred in the early morning hours of New Year's Day.
There's a notable person who doesn't believe the reignition theory: Alan Feld. Alan lives right next to the origin. He was at the burn scar literally minutes before the fire broke out. And the raw physical geography of what he details all but debunks reignition. On January 7th at 9:30 a.m., just an hour before the fire starts, Alan goes on a walk.
So basically what we're doing right now is just the walk you did that morning?
Yes. Yeah. It's a walk that I do probably 3-4 days a week at least with a good friend who lives in the neighborhood. The real reason we went up the trail that day is we were talking about how concerned we were about the New Year's Day fire. So it starts as concrete and it turns into a real trail in a few minutes. See, park closed for public safety. That's fine.
Around 9:50 a.m., 40 minutes before the fire breaks out, Alan walks directly past the burn scar.
But we walked through this burn scar that day and didn't see anything unusual. The burn scar started right here. You can sort of see where there's no more vegetation. It's not growing that quickly. There was nothing smoldering. It looked like it was completely out. I don't think this New Year's Day fire had anything to do with it.
At around 10 a.m., 30 minutes before the fire, Alan walks about 500 meters to a nearby formation called Skull Rock.
So this is the infamous Skull Rock. If you look at it, it looks like a beak, and you can even see like the sockets of an eye. And people actually climb up there. It's very common to see people sitting up there having a picnic.
Just after 10 a.m., Alan spots 2 people at the top of Skull Rock.
They're 2 young people sitting up at the very top. I said to my friend, I hope they're not smoking or anything up on a windy day like this.
By 10:25 a.m., Alan is hiked back down to the street, and he spots the fire.
We were in the front of those houses on the street when we first spotted the fire.
He remembers seeing it directly in front of Skull Rock. And that would make the true origin at least 500 meters away from the burn scar.
I don't think this has anything to do with the New Year's Day burn scar. It's very possible now looking at this that those kids smoking on Skull Rock, that there were some stray embers that went down that way, something caught.
If Alan is right, federal authorities could be wrong. The fire might not have been a reignite, and they might have the wrong guy. And the true origin of the fire that burned down my hometown becomes an open question.
Well, did you guys light a cigarette? Are you guys smoking yet? So now, this is very interesting, isn't it? Have you guys heard this story? So this is a resident who lived up in the Highlands, and he was one of the first to call in the fire. And he's claiming that he saw multiple people on Skull Rock, which is near the Lockman fire scar. It's not immediately adjacent to it, but it's nearby, right? It's the same trail. He said he saw a couple dudes sitting on that rock smoking, and that they must have tossed a cigarette, and the fire started directly below Skull Rock, which would have been close to the Lockman fire origin. So, we had multiple firefighters say that the Lockman fire, or I think over the radio they were saying the New Year's Eve fire rekindled. It's going again. So you had 2 firefighters saying that. That was the pilot on Copter 4, Fire 4, LAFD Firecopter 4, said that it was just south of the Lockman scar. And then I think it was the captain on 23s as he was driving in, he spotted it as the Lockman fire burning again. So the thing is, this guy would have been closer to the origin of the fire than the captain of 23s going up there, right? And he wouldn't have necessarily had a good view of exactly where that header is coming from. And this dude, Allen, would have had a much better view of where the origin is. So it may have been close enough from looking at it from 2 miles away to identify that as coming off of the edge of the Lockman Fire scar. And the Fire 4 copter got there, like 8 minutes into the incident? The thing could have burned up to the Lockman scar by that point, at which point it would be difficult to ascertain, well, did it start right at the edge of the scar or did it burn its way back? Even though, look, it would be going against the wind. Can it cover, what was that, 500 meters? Can it cover 1,500 feet in 8 minutes, burning against the wind? I mean, it would be burning uphill. So maybe by the time Copter 4 got there and had that bird's eye view of it, it had burned back towards the Lockman Fire scar, and it was no longer distinguishable as having originated close by, right? But adjacent. Now, he didn't quite frame the end of it right. I mean, he sort of left it as like, well, the feds got the wrong guy. Okay, so then they just need to reopen the case and they need to pursue the right guy. Okay? It's worse than that. Because if it's true that somebody caused the fire on January 7th and it wasn't a rekindle from January 1st, then that means Gavin Newsom is all but entirely off the hook. You understand that the only reason why the state is liable and that the victims have the opportunity to sue the state, and remember that Karen Bass, they are cross-suing. They have joined the case. They're suing Gavin Newsom as well because they know they're going to lose. And they want to make sure that when they lose, they can get some of that money for restitution from the state. So it's not just the thousands of Palisades Fire victims, but the city itself wants to sue Gavin Newsom and California State Parks and Rec. The only reason why they're on the hook is the dangerous condition theory, meaning they left this smoldering fire unattended. Well, if that smoldering fire did not cause the January 7th fire and there was another cause on the day, they're off the hook. The only thing that they could say is, well, they left too much fuel around the neighborhood, but I think the court has already overruled that. Like that's not, there's no culpability with that, meaning you can't sue them for not clearing brush. So if this dude's testimony is true, then that means the lawsuit might be totally fucked. Totally fucked. Now, let's start by addressing a few things because again, there's a lot of holes that we need to fill. But this dude, in terms of witness testimony, this is the closest to the origin of the fire, the closest to the time of the origin of the fire, in terms of he was hiking up there around 10 o'clock in the morning. So we have to take this seriously. The question becomes, were there people up at Skull Rock when he said there were? And the answer is yes. Yes.
Oh
Do you guys remember this?
We gotta go. We still gotta go. Let's go. Let's go.
You guys remember that video that came out early on? These kids who were running away from the fire?
We gotta go. We still gotta go. Let's go. Let's go.
It's catching.
These guys were up there. They were up there right at the origin of the fire. And I remember when they first posted that video, I reposted that and said, I would really like to talk to those guys. Whatever happened to it? Well, now we have corroborating witness testimony of a guy saying that he saw these guys up there. They were sitting on the rock and that they were smoking. And then sure enough, the fire started minutes later. Here's the thing. What was I saying earlier about conflating facts and evidence and proof? Right? These are all different things. So you've got facts, you've got evidence, and you've got proof. And a lot of times people will think that they're interchangeable. Now you could throw 1,000 true facts at somebody. It doesn't actually indicate any evidence of a crime. You could have a lot of evidence of a crime, but that is not proof of a crime. So for example, let's say your bank got robbed and you went in and you withdrew a bunch of money. You were going to Vegas. You withdrew a bunch of money, and then that bank got robbed, and someone said, "Hey, I saw Casey K at that Chase Bank branch, and he came out with a bag full of money. And then later on the news, I saw that bank was robbed." Now, is that proof that he robbed the bank? No, of course not. You would need to triangulate that through other bits of evidence. Is it evidence that he robbed the bank? Well, I don't know, maybe. Again, you would need to triangulate that. You would have to corroborate it with something else. But those are facts. Those are facts, right? It's a fact that he was there. It's a fact that he walked out with a bunch of money. It's a fact that the bank got robbed. Now, this is something that everyone on the internet does these days, especially like the Candace Owens types. They do this thing where they will just stack a bunch of facts, and some of them may be dubious, but like, just take it for granted. They just stack a bunch of facts in a sequence. They put all these bricks, right? These fact bricks in the shape of a house, but they don't put any mortar in between. They don't make any connections. They don't draw any conclusions. They'll just say, well, Casey was at the Chase Bank. He came out with a bunch of money. The bank got robbed. That's weird. Don't you think that's weird? I think that's weird. Now, I'm not accusing him of anything, but I'm implying it. And here's the thing about the human brain. The human brain automatically is wired to fill gaps. It has to. It's a survival mechanism. We have to identify patterns. That's how human beings have survived, by pattern recognition. So when you present facts, we're always going to try to cross that synapse and find and identify a pattern and draw a conclusion between those facts. It is a natural human brain thing to do. So when people do this, they lay out a bunch of facts. They know that they could put all these bricks in the shape of a house. You will put the mortar in between the bricks automatically, because that's what humans do. And then when that conclusion is wrong, they'll say, "Oh, I never said that. I just presented facts. Did I say anything that's not true?" They do this, and then they have this weaselly way of getting out of not ever putting their name on it. Now, what do we have here? It is a true fact that Alan is correct, that there were some youths up on Skull Rock at the time of ignition, and we have video evidence of it. What were they doing up there? And why haven't we heard more about it?
Oh my God. We gotta go. We still gotta go.
It's catching up fast.
The Palisades Fire has burned 23,000 acres and killed at least 8 people already, and it's been burning since last Tuesday. Shortly after the fire broke out, a user on X posted a video online showing him and his friends running away from the Palisades Fire right after it had started, when it was just a small wildfire before it had burned down to all the houses.
Wait, we're in a fire right now. Guys, we gotta go up. Let's go up. Let's go up. Go, 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 go.
The post quickly went viral for all the wrong reasons. People started blaming these 5 men for starting the fire and suggesting that they should be investigated for arson over the fire because the men were carrying backpacks and were so close to the fire's origin that people just started getting suspicious online, even though they had no proof that these men had anything to do with the fire. One of the men who had posted the video actually deactivated his account and took the video down because he was getting so much negative response to the video. Rob Schneider, the actor, had even reposted the video and called on authorities to investigate and find out who these men were. I spoke with Benny Oren, who was the man who posted the video. He's a 24-year-old who runs a glamping business, and he said that he and his friends were out on a trail run on Tuesday morning around 8 a.m. and that they ran all the way up to Skull Rock, which is right about where the fire started. And they got there around 10 a.m. and went off the trail looking for another rock to meditate on. They started meditating and they were doing this thing where they were saying how they were feeling. And one of them said, "I can feel gravity working on me." Another said, "I can feel my heart slowing down. I can feel my breath slowing down." And then 4 of them all at once said, "I can smell fire." They opened their eyes and they saw the fire cresting over the ridge just above them. Oren told me that he was just grateful to get out of there, and the whole day he just couldn't believe how big the fire was getting and that they'd really been there at the start of it. But then after he posted on X, everything went wrong and he started being blamed for the fire. He got really scared of users on X who, everyone's trying to figure out how these fires started, and with so little information out there as to what actually caused the fires, his video of the very beginning of the fire, people really just latched onto it. And now he's been dealing with all the negative effects of people's reactions to the video. He told me he just wants to get his story out there so people understand that he and his friends didn't start the Palisades Fire. He said he's from Malibu and he has friends whose houses have burned down, and that if you know him, you would understand how ridiculous it is to assume that he might have started something like this.
Now we have conflicting testimony. So we've got Alan saying that he was up there smoking, and then we've got Benny saying, yeah, I was up there. We were sitting on the rocks. So yes, Alan did see us, but we didn't start the fire. Now, that sounds like exactly what someone who started the worst wildfire in the history of the state would say. Of course, he's going to say we didn't start the fire. Now, he claims that he was up there meditating. Now, these are young guys. Is it possible that they were smoking? Do they seem like the smoking type to you? Well, does that even mean anything? No. And Phil Cunningham points out that there's circumstantial evidence that exists to support both theories. Well, we've just corroborated that, yeah, these guys were up there at the time of the fire. So Alan was correct. He's not lying. He did see them up there. He saw them at Skull Rock. And given that we are now dealing with conflicting testimony, it's he said, and we've got circumstantial evidence. Well, clearly we need some real evidence. We need some real evidence. Something either was inculpatory or exculpatory. So how do we determine if this is true or not? Again, guys, if they caused the fire on the 7th, the entire lawsuit is basically fucked. You understand that? Now, we got to get oriented here, okay? Now, Donia asks, but Alan said he hoped the guys weren't smoking, but you'll notice at the end of the video, he also says they were smoking. Okay, so this is, again, we have conflicting testimony even amongst one witness. I'll play it again, but I just want to get you guys oriented so you know what we're talking about. Here's the Skull Rock area down right here. This is Skull Rock, these rock formations right here. And the Lockman fire, it originated from right up here, right at Temescal Ridge Trail and the Split Rock Fire Road. So it started basically right there. So let's see, can we do a measured distance? Because ultimately it ended up burning to about here, on par with where this pool is. That's your landmark of that's as far south as the Lockman fire went. So this area right here is roughly where the feds determined the origin of the Palisades fire was. But Alan is claiming that he saw the fire here. Now, if you're looking from the street, he's looking from down here, I believe, and he claims he saw it here. So he would not be confusing this for this. I hope you guys can see where my cursor is. If you're looking from down here, then you don't have a parallax problem. If you're looking from over here, and the Lockman fire stopped here, and then the Palisades fire is burning here, well, I mean, you have a parallax issue here, right? You don't have enough perspective to see just how far away this actually is from the scar because it's on the same line. If you're looking at it from here, it's on a different line, okay? He's looking at it from down here on Chastain. So this isn't looking good. But let's see, what's the distance from here, the edge of where the Lockman fire was, do measure distance to Skull Rock. That is, it's saying 1,000 feet, 1,049 feet. So that's like 300, that's 300 meters. I mean, it's significant, but it's not that far away. And what I will tell you, having been on lots and lots and lots and lots of fires, the fire always looks closer than it really is. Always. Always. So let's go back to the Rob Montz video and let's listen to Alan towards the end to satisfy Donia's question here. Turn up the volume.
Ruin. Our documentary revealed Alan is hiked back down to the street and he spots the fire.
We were in the front of those houses on the street when we first spotted the fire.
He remembers seeing it directly in front of Skull Rock. And that would make the true origin at least 500 meters away from the burn scar.
I don't think this has anything to do with the New Year's Day burn scar. It's very possible now, looking at this, that those kids smoking on Skull Rock, that there.
Notice what he said? He says, it's very possible that those kids smoking up on Skull Rock had some stray embers. Now, he's not saying it's possible they were smoking. He's saying they were smoking and it's possible that they had some stray embers. And you'll notice he said he saw it directly.
Spots two people at the top of Skull Rock.
They're two young people sitting up at the very top.
He said,
we were in the front of those houses on the street when we first spotted the fire.
He remembers seeing it directly in front of Skull Rock.
Directly in front of Skull Rock. Directly in front of Skull Rock, which is over 1,000 feet away. Casey K is asking, how come Alan didn't speak up before this now? Well, let's find out. Let's get past the circumstantial and let's trust our lying eyes. Or Alan's lying eyes. What do you notice in this video? Let me maximize this for you just so we can see. I'm going to try to not screw this up, but we'll watch the beginning. But there's, once we skip past the editorial stuff, I want you to pay attention to the video of the kids running away and see if there's any visual cues and clues in this that could get us past the circumstantial he said, she said, and see if we have any evidence that's either inculpatory or exculpatory. Is it inculpatory? Is that what it is? Inculpatory. There. What do you guys notice here? See that? What are you noticing? Let's see if we can skip ahead to another clip. Here. What do you notice? Right here. This is the most important part. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? Let me change the format here. That last 5 seconds. What does this show us? That's Skull Rock in the shot. People who know the area, they know that that little lobster claw right there. You see that hole in the rock? They're at Skull Rock. Now, according to this video, based on this video evidence, this is them running away from the fire. Do you see any fire around Skull Rock? Right there. They're right in front of Skull Rock. Nothing is on fire around them. Alan is full of shit. Alan did not see the fire directly below Skull Rock because these kids are running around Skull Rock, and do you see anything on fire around them? No, you don't. Now you see some smoke in the distance because it's drifting south, right? Remember, the prevailing winds, if we look at the map, just so we're oriented, it's always important to be oriented. I looked up inculpatory. I had it right. That is the right word. Okay, so the winds are blowing this away. They're going south towards the ocean. So if there were fire right here, you'd see it. And you'd see a thick column of smoke. If the fire were up here at the Lockman Scar, you would see a thin veil of smoke making its way past here. Now, looking at this video, tell me, do you see that? Because this first entree right here, this is inconclusive because it's hard to tell, is that just over the ridge or is that 2 ridges over? Like I said before, it's very hard to pinpoint exactly how close a fire is. It always looks closer. But see this thin veil of smoke here? This thin veil of smoke that's passing by Skull Rock, it's southwest of it, right? You can see it's not like that veil of smoke isn't hitting Skull Rock, but you can see it over their shoulders. You can see it over their shoulders. And so what does that tell you? Well, that's drift smoke from a considerable distance, but relatively close, that's coming with those northerly winds, right? Or southerly winds. So the evidence here immediately invalidates what Alan said. Yes, he did see them up there. He claims they were smoking. There's no validation of that. And there's no way we could prove that. You know what I mean? Because these guys are going to say, yeah, we weren't smoking. But just on the visual alone, Alan was absolutely mistaken. He did not see the fire below Skull Rock because we have video of this. Now, the guy who made this, Rob Montz, he's a very skilled filmmaker, but he's not a good journalist, because this video came out, I think, within hours. They had posted this within hours of the ignition, maybe within 30 minutes of the ignition of this fire. This video was online, and I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, we got to question those guys. Because my first thought was these morons were vaping up there or something, or they were fucking around and they caused the fire. But they're claiming they didn't. And the video evidence shows that they actually didn't have any fire near Skull Rock. And what Rob did here is, it's sort of like what Candace Owens is trying to do with the whole Charlie Kirk thing. It's like she's trying to sabotage the entire case and is using all this innuendo and not actually validating anything and stacking those fact bricks in the shape of a house, not putting the spackle in between, not putting the mortar in between. So then she can claim like, oh, I didn't draw any conclusions. You did that. I had mentioned that these guys have already been questioned by authorities and they were cleared. And you can see on the video that obviously the fire wasn't anywhere near Skull Rock. Rob could have checked this. He could have taken 30 seconds to fucking Google who was up there at Skull Rock. And he would have seen this produced video in the LA Times. And with any shred of discernment, you would just look at this and go, okay, well, there's Skull Rock and there's no fire anywhere near Skull Rock. So Alan is wrong. And you would have confronted Alan with that and say, hey, check out this video. These are the guys who you saw. There's no fire around Skull Rock. Do you think maybe you were mistaken on where you saw that? But no, he's not done that. He's not taken down this video. He instead said, well, Alan's been really reliable on some other timeline things. Well, I don't care. Alan, you'll notice, is wearing fucking glasses.
The biggest urban wildfire in American.
He's wearing glasses. Now, not to be that guy. And if you wear glasses, I'm not trying to shit on you, but I'm not going to fucking trust your testimony on where you saw something. Okay. Especially because I have 20/10 vision. So when I see this dork with his glasses pushing a narrative that could potentially fuck every victim of the Palisades fire, and then Rob is going along with it, and he says shit like, oh, well, Alan's been reliable on some timeline stuff, and I'm open to this. Like, okay, this is not what real investigation is, okay? It's not about being open to everything. If there's ever like a big criminal investigation, the FBI or a local PD, they open up a tip line. They get tens of fucking thousands of tips. It's not your job as an investigator to chase down every fucking tip. Your job is to have discernment. And there's certain things that you can just immediately bat away, and you don't have to chase them down a rabbit hole. That's what real investigators do. Now, I think this is so reckless. And the thing is, Rob said that his childhood home burned down. Now, I don't know if that means that his home burned down or he used to live there. It's no longer his home, but it was when he was a child and that burned down. So I don't know if he's got skin in the game. I don't know if he is a victim of this fire. But this kind of Candace Owens level journalism is the kind of shit that can really fuck everybody, right? This can fuck everybody. And I guarantee you that the defendants in the lawsuit are going to use this to try to sow doubt, especially if it goes before a jury. So I just want to put this on public record to show just how quickly we can invalidate Alan's bullshit testimony. And for those of you who are asking, why didn't he come forward before? Well, that's because true investigators, not like Rob Montz here, but real investigators who have discernment, they did what a normal, rational, intelligent person would do. They would look at the fucking video and they can immediately determine that, no, Alan is completely full of shit, or he's mistaken, or he's just blind as a fucking bat. And that's why he's got those Coke bottle glasses. And he did not see it below Skull Rock. He is wrong. He is wrong. So Board Elon Musk asks, is this the same Adam Feld who works for Shepard, Mullen, Richter, and Hampton LLP, who are affiliated with the Democrat Party? Oh my God. The firm's political action committee, individual attorneys, have a history of making donations to Democrat candidates, including Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. Now that bored Elon Musk may have just dropped a nuke on this live stream. If Alan Feld, I think his name's Alan Feld, right? He said it was Alan. Let's, where is this?
Reignition theory. Fire broke out. He was at the Burns theory. Alan Feld.
Alan Feld. Board. All right. I need you guys to search Alan Feld. I will say there's certain clues that would tell me he's probably an attorney. And all my shalomies who are celebrating Passover this week, you know what I mean. I think it's pretty not surprising that this man is an attorney, and there's some clues here. Bored Elon Musk dropping the nukes. Is it possible that Alan is deliberately sowing this misinformation because he's trying to protect Gavin Newsom? Holy shit, did this just get real? Wow. Donya de California says, I immediately thought of my cousin Vinny Glass's scene. Exactly. It's exactly what I was thinking. Because I will say, when I first saw this video, I was taken aback because I'm like, man, this dude is closer than any of the firefighters, even though obviously I would trust firefighters' discernment more than this guy. Look, like I said, the captain on 23s was coming up from well down the road. I think they were even down at the beach. And Copter 4 didn't arrive for 8 minutes. So it's possible that it burned up towards the Lockman scar, and it wouldn't be immediately discernible the exact point of origin at that point, right? All that said, my immediate thought was, this guy can't see shit, right? Is he deliberately sowing misinformation into this case? Because what do we know? This is extremely damaging to Democrats. And this is one of the more frustrating things about this whole case, by the way. Because there's uniparty rule, when it comes to Mayor Bass, the two senators from California, and the key player, which is Gavin Newsom, right? It's his property where the fire started, and it's his employees. And we all know the reality. Gavin Newsom is a sacred cow in the Democrat Party. Karen Bass is another sacred cow in the Democrat Party. Gavin Newsom is running for president. Obviously, Karen Bass is running for re-election. And we just saw how the Pali Dems, they gave Spencer the cold shoulder, right? Even though he's been fighting for their community for 14 months. So it just shows how craven these people are. And, what's unfortunate about this, like I always say, political tribalism has melted everybody's brains. And one thing I can tell you, there are a lot of fire victims, and I've said this multiple times, who are actively suing Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass for this fire because they lost their homes due to this fire. They're actively suing Gavin Newsom while simultaneously contributing to his presidential campaign. And when they get their restitution from Gavin Newsom or from state taxpayers, they will use that to bankroll Gavin Newsom's campaign. They have Stockholm syndrome. Or they're such devout political tribalists, that no amount of tragedy can sway them from supporting him. I mean, why not just pick another horse? Like Kamala Harris, pick someone who wasn't associated with this. You could still vote Democrat, you still vote for your tribe, but why Gavin Newsom? So if it's true that Alan Feld is one of these Michael Clayton type of attorneys, the problem is, because all of the leaders who fucked up happen to be Democrats, any criticism of the leaders who were responsible for this fire automatically becomes partisan, which is really, really frustrating. It's like if you criticize a person of color, then you're automatically racist. Okay, you're not allowed to criticize somebody because of a certain association. We can't criticize Gavin Newsom because, you're just MAGA. I find that to be total bullshit. But if Alan Feld is lying to try to get Gavin Newsom off the hook, and remember, Gavin Newsom is only on the hook if this was a rekindle. Okay? He's only on the hook if it's a rekindle. And so if he's deliberately trying to sow some doubt with his fake testimony because of some political gamesmanship, this is the story of the fucking century. This is crazy. Superpav says he's a bankruptcy and restructuring attorney. Think the state and city might need one still. That's 100% right. Oh, yeah. Man, well, bored Elon Musk just gave us way too much to digest. So thank you very much. Now I know what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the day. But there's other things that we have to discuss because look, okay, maybe his eyesight was a little off. Maybe he didn't place it quite right. And the other thing is maybe those guys, they weren't just at Skull Rock. Maybe they walked up towards the little Buddha area and maybe they dropped their cigarette up there, right? So the question becomes, as I said at the beginning, can a cigarette start a wildfire? Well, the ATF investigated this, okay? So if we want to know what the ATF feels about Alan's story, they said the potential causes such as campfires and smoking were excluded because the initial fire appeared to have been burning in the root system of dense vegetation. Moreover, there was no evidence to support human involvement on January 7th, other than Rinderneck's actions on January 1st in the start of the Palisades Fire. So the ATF has entirely ruled out human involvement on January 7th. And I can tell you, they absolutely contacted Benny Oren. If the LA Times interviewed him, you know the feds interviewed him as well. So they already cleared him. And they determined that there was no human involvement on January 7th. So hopefully that's enough to put this to bed. The thing is, though, the question of the cigarette. The investigative team concluded that the rapid growth of the fire, meaning the Lockman fire, was consistent with a sudden conflagration, was inconsistent with a slow developing smoldering fire, such as can be caused by a discarded cigarette. So now, the ATF does not have any evidence of human involvement outside of Jonathan Rinderneck. Okay, and that's the commie arsonist who they pegged earlier. Now, how do they know that he did this on purpose? How do they know that he did this on purpose? Because this video from Rob Montz, it's not the only new information that we have. We actually have some new information from the court, okay? And it's very interesting. And it actually does potentially change in a very real way the potential cause of this fire, okay? We've all just sort of taken it face value that Rinderneck caused the fire and that he said it maliciously because that's what the feds have said. How do they know this, though? How do they know this? Well, let's go through it because there is new evidence coming out. So the investigative team concluded that the rapid growth of the fire was consistent with a sudden conflagration, was inconsistent with a slow developing smoldering fire, such as can be caused by a discarded cigarette. Now, the cunning Phil Cunningham, is that true? Would you be able to discern, let's say, here's the thing. In terms of witnessing the Lockman fire starting, they have the time-lapse video from those alert wildfire cameras where there's a 1 minute gap in between frames. By watching that, where they're looking at a frame and then a minute later, another frame, and whatever happened in between that minute, they're determining that the Lockman fire grew rapidly. And they're determining this, even though that fire is on night vision camera, where you're going to get a bloom that's going to make, it's an exposure thing, right? It's a camera optics thing. It's going to bloom and it's always going to look bigger than you think. And so it might look like it's growing very rapidly, but this is how they've determined that that fire grew rapidly, even though it only burned 8 acres. They said that if it were started by a cigarette, it wouldn't grow rapidly. And that ignition would look different than if it were started by a lighter. Now, who's ever lit some leaves on fire with a lighter? What does it look like? And how would it look any different from a cigarette igniting some grass? Now, I showed this video at the beginning. Let me turn off the sound. I played this clip from my movie specifically because I wanted you to see this part where we see how grass ignites. Okay, right there. Once it gets going, and that's me I just dropped some hot slag in there. That's all. So let's just say you lit that grass on fire with a lighter. Now, hot slag would ignite grass in a similar fashion to a cigarette. And depending on how hot or dry it is, it's either going to smolder, and then once it ignites, right, it's not going to be visible until it actually produces a flame. once it produces that flame, how is that going to look any different from if you lit it with a lighter? We're talking about a difference in a second, 2 seconds. Once that cigarette reaches enough, it gets that grass to enough heat that it actually turns into flame. I mean, once it starts burning, you see how quickly it just eats through the grass. How would that be distinguishable from a lighter? Especially when you're looking at a time-lapse video where you're missing an entire minute in between frames. How are they determining the rate of spread on that fire? I feel like this is kind of shaky. Now, there's a reason why this is important. The ATF is trying to rule out causes of this fire so they can identify what the actual cause is, because they may never know. Like I said in that tweet, short of a confession, they're going to have a hard time proving this. So we got to look to what evidence do they actually have that Jonathan Rinderknecht maliciously set this fire. Daniel Firecopter says, I feel like a cigarette would start a grass fire easily, but is it enough heat to start heavy brush to catch on fire? It's not. And neither is a lighter, which is what they're accusing him of starting the fire with, right? A lighter, it's just a tiny bit of flame. So like the same amount of flame you would get off of a blade of grass. So once that cigarette ignites a blade of grass and is producing visible flame that you would, see on a camera, well, then you've got a grass fire going, and it's that grass fire that gets the light brush and then gets the medium brush and so on. That's why I wanted to play that fire ladder clip at the beginning of the stream, because regardless of the source of ignition, unless we're talking about a frickin' blowtorch, which obviously wasn't used, the rate of spread from when a cigarette finally ignites that grass to when a lighter ignites that grass, it's going to be not discernible. Please tell me if I'm wrong, right? I'll do an experiment on this. We'll post it on Twitter. I'll try to light some grass with a cigarette, and then I'll light some grass with a lighter, and we'll see if the rate of spread is any different. Once the grass gets going, it gets going. ATF, they said that fireworks were excluded. In pertinent part, nobody, including Rinderknecht, saw fireworks in the vicinity of the Pacific Palisades prior to the start of the Lockman fire. None of the voluminous UCSD video footage captured evidence of fireworks in the area prior to the start of the Lockman fire, and no evidence of fireworks were found in the origin area. Now, like I said, is it possible that if someone shot off a bottle rocket, if somebody shot off one of those fireworks where it explodes and it's not the cardboard casing that falls down and ignites the brush below, but it's one of those little, what would that be? Is that just like gunpowder? One of those little sparklers that shoots off from the main firework body, that drops in there. Well, would there be any evidence of that? No. Even if the cardboard wrapping of it were to land in that area, might it not burn up? Might the rotor wash from the helicopters flying overhead blow it away? That's certainly possible. Okay, so the absence of physical evidence of fireworks in the area does not disprove that it was fireworks. Furthermore, look at what they say here. Nobody saw fireworks in the vicinity of the Pacific Palisades prior to the start of the Lockman fire. Well, ladies and gentlemen, ATF doesn't even agree with ATF. In one of their original filings, on January 10th, 2024, okay, that's definitely, okay, they got the wrong date. They mean 2025. ATF special agents interviewed a resident of a property located on Villa Costa, Pacific Palisades, whose house is approximately 2,100 feet away from the general origin area. The resident stated that on January 1 at approximately 12:10, that's when the fire started, the resident heard fireworks in the vicinity of the general origin area. The resident stated that after hearing the fireworks, the resident observed a fire in the same area. So you have an ATF special agent is getting witness testimony that they heard fireworks and then immediately saw a fire afterwards. And now they're claiming nobody saw fireworks. So are they trying to do a little sleight of hand? Are they saying, well, you heard the fireworks, you didn't see them? Let's go on. On January 12th, 2025, at least they corrected the date there, ATF CFI spoke with the captain of Los Angeles City Fire Department Station 23, which responded to the January 1, 2025 fire. According to the captain, Station 23 received a call reporting a fire in the general origin area on January 1st at approximately 1:18 a.m. Again, that's a typo. According to the captain, the suspected cause of this fire was fireworks. So you're already seeing some discrepancies here. So the ATF seems very confident that it wasn't fireworks, and yet they're not reporting that they had previously identified that not only did a witness claim they heard fireworks immediately before ignition, but then you also have a career firefighter telling you that they suspected it was fireworks. Now, does that mean that it was fireworks? It ain't proof, but that is evidence. And the fact that ATF is leaving this out, I'm telling you, man, they're going to have a hard time trying this case. We have this. This is the follow-up investigation from the LAFD. On Thursday, February 13th, investigator Angel Alvarez spoke with redacted via Zoom call. I was following up with him from a statement that he gave to Channel 5 News. The following summary of the digitally recorded interview. They stated he was walking on the fire road off of Lockman Lane because he wanted to watch the fireworks in the city. Right around midnight, he heard a loud bang and saw the reflection of a flash coming from his backside. He described it as a firework that went off. Several minutes later, he sees what he believes is a fire developing in the same general area. He decided to hike closer to it to confirm whether or not it was a fire. Then at approximately 0014 hours, he takes a picture of the hillside where there is active fire. He then tried to call 911, but had a hard time connecting through. He stated his mother was able to get through, and that's why he believes the fire department showed up at their house. On February 18th, I emailed him asking if he could share more pictures to share about the night of the fires and if he could pinpoint the location on the mountain from where he took the picture. Emailed me a screenshot of the drop pin of his location at the time of the fire and a short video of the fire already free burning. They had no further information at this time. Here is the picture. This is a frame grab that this eyewitness claims they saw a flash of fireworks from behind them and then saw this fire forming. This was the Lockman fire. So according to them, they believe it was fireworks. And they placed their location where they took that image, and it's off of Piedra Morada, which is like here, right? Where's Piedra Morada? Is that down here? Where is it? Right there. So they took this picture here, right here, okay? It's about 3,000, that's almost a mile away. Almost a mile away, okay? Now you're oriented. Guys, what if this was fireworks? What if it was fireworks and Rinderknecht is not guilty? Board Elon Musk says, I did hear fireworks on New Year's Eve, and I quote, live down the road. It would not be surprising that a fire started at midnight on New Year's Eve might be fireworks. Now, that was my original thesis. I thought, and I posted about this multiple times, I thought this was fireworks. I thought it was an accidental ignition. And this certainly changes the dynamic. Well, now we've got this from the defense attorney of Jonathan Rinderknecht in a motion to suppress evidence that they believe was obtained illegally and unconstitutionally. They've put this out. 31 witnesses. Was one of them bored Elon Musk? Maybe, maybe not. But 31 witnesses have been identified who either saw or heard fireworks in the area of origin where the Lockman fire started. Some witnesses in the neighborhood below the origin of the Lockman fire even complained to federal investigators of the historical problem with New Year's Eve fireworks and the region's tortured history of such activity on New Year's Eve causing fires. Bored Elon Musk, is this true? I don't know how long you've lived there, but is it true that the neighborhood does have an issue with fireworks? It's LA, baby. I remember 2020. It was the 4th of July, you know, when they had all the COVID lockdowns and Gavin Newsom told everybody, don't do fireworks. And then, of course, LA just, dude, it was like, it was shock and awe. They don't care. They're going to do fireworks. They don't care about the fire risk. They're going to do it. On January 10th, 2024. Okay. These guys need to get their dates right. ATF special agents interviewed a resident of the property located on Villa Costa. The resident stated that after hearing what the resident believed to be fireworks, the resident observed a fire in the same area. Okay, that's what we saw in that original report. One witness interviewed by the government even heard the loud bang of a firework, immediately saw a flash of light, and then concurrent to hearing the loud bang, took a picture at 12:14 of the hillside at light, which nobody disputes is the first direct evidence of the start of the Lockman fire. Doña de California says, we have an issue in Bel Air with fireworks. Bel Air is next. Be careful. This is why you need to elect Spencer Pratt, because what I do know, when Spencer is mayor, he is going to immediately, and he's already talked with Chief Garcia of the Angeles National Forest. He is going to leverage their crews to come and help remove brush around Bel Air, Hollywood Hills, Topanga, Brentwood, and then obviously Sunland, Tahunga, Sylmar, Shadow Hills, all these areas they're going to be the next Palisades. So just be careful. You got to vote for Spencer. There's no choice. Moving on. Again, this is from Rinderneck's defense attorney. In fact, in the government's own application for the subject search warrants, they stated, quote, the likely cause of the Lockman fire was due to fireworks. Okay. So this is when they were trying to get a search warrant, and they had honed in on Rinderneck back on the 18th of January. Okay. So they've been trying to build this case for months and months and months, but they were applying for a search warrant on the 18th of January. And at that point, they said the likely cause of the fire was due to fireworks, a logical inference that was even the opinion of the entire responding firefighters of Engine 23, including Engine 23 Captain Ed Sanders, who told neighborhood residents at the scene that the fire was started by fireworks. Now, I've been on fires where it was a nothing fire. It was like 5 acres. It was off the side of the 14 freeway. LA County got it wrapped up in half an hour. And I hear over the radio, they say, it's operations talking to incident command. And they say, hey, brother, you want to call this a cigarette? You're like, yeah, I'm cool with that. Meaning they didn't find it necessary to do like a really thorough investigation. And when they can't, nothing's obvious and there's no real damage, and it's kind of just a routine little brusher, they're just like, just call it a cigarette and call it a day. It's not uncommon for them to just throw out what could be a relatively logical assumption. And even though that's not a definitive cause of the fire, that's what they say. So if a captain is telling people it was fireworks, it could be one of those situations where, dude, the thing burned a few acres. It didn't hurt anybody. It's probably fireworks. So we can't necessarily stake anything on just what they're saying. But is this enough for reasonable doubt? We got to look into what evidence the ATF actually has. On January 12th, CFI spoke with the captain of Los Angeles City Fire Department. This was the station that responded to the January 1st Lockman fire. According to the captain, Station 23 received a call reporting a fire at the general origin area at approximately 1:18 a.m. According to the captain, the suspected cause of the fire, based only on information obtained through this call, was fireworks. Now, again, we're talking about the Lockman fire. What does this do? If Rinderneck didn't cause the fire, how does this change? Well, in my opinion, if the more the arsonist is on the hook for this, the more culpability he has, the more liability he has, which means the less liability the state has. Now, at the end of the day, there was such a long period of time in between the Lockman fire, the stopping forward progress, until January 7th, that, dude, at a certain point, like, you've transferred ownership of that fire, and there were so many times, so many opportunities for the state to stop this, and they had an obligation to do so, and they didn't do it. At this point, I would still say that, okay, let's say Rinderneck did it, and he did it maliciously. He's responsible for 8 acres. That's it. So he's going to have to pay $500,000 for the cost of that firefight, for all the copter time and the water and the foam. But beyond that, I don't know how you can pin this on him. However, it gets even more definitive if this was accidental and it was fireworks, and they can't even identify who set off those fireworks. This could be a potentially big deal that augments the case on behalf of the plaintiffs. In the government's own affidavit for search warrants, let me try this again. In the government's own affidavit for search warrants, they did not include one single particularized fact linking the defendant to the criminal activity alleged, i.e. arson, or establish a nexus between the items to be searched and evidence of the crime of arson. In fact, the determination that a crime had even been committed was not made until 8 months after the government sought search warrants in this case. Like I told you, they were petitioning for these warrants on January 18th. Okay, so they had pieced together surveillance video from everybody's neighborhood cameras, and they had already traced Rinderneck's car movements, and they'd identified his license plate. So they knew who he was very early on, and they were trying to get the search warrant to search his phone, his car, and they were saying that, you know, arsonists typically they have the same clothes, they usually don't get rid of it. They usually have the thing that they use to start the fire, they don't get rid of it. So to illustrate, not until August 8th, 2025, did the government arrive at the conclusion that the cause of the Lockman fire was incendiary. Interesting. Now, it is this is from Jonathan Rinderneck's defense attorney. And the thing to point out is we've learned so much in between when the government filed charges against Rinderneck, and now we have the sworn testimony of the LAFD, thanks to Spencer Pratt and thanks to Alexander Robertson, the attorneys, who finally got that testimony. And thank God for Scott Pike having the candor to do this. We know so much more. Okay? It is abundantly clear now that the Palisades fire was never a, quote, holdover fire. Now, we've talked about the difference between a holdover and a rekindle, right? A holdover implies that it went deep underground and it was totally invisible. A rekindle is different. It's more surface layer. And like Scott Pike was saying in his testimony, you just kick over some ash pits and it's like very obvious. They're saying that it was obvious that it was never a holdover fire hiding 20 feet deep, undetected in a deep root system, but instead an abandoned, unextinguished brush fire, visible and known to many, including firefighters and the on-site LAFD battalion chief. Multiple individuals attested to the visible smoldering, unextinguished burn scar, which is the opposite of what the government claimed in justifying their criminal charges. So now, the very thing that we're pointing out as evidence of negligence by the LAFD and state parks is the very thing that's going to give the federal government a hard time proving that Rinderneck is responsible for anything more than 8 acres. The Palisades fire was a blatant reflection of gross negligence and rampant, systematic failures of multiple governmental agencies to become one of the most destructive and entirely preventable human tragedies in Los Angeles history. Now, to illustrate, let's see. Not until August 2025 did the government arrive at the conclusion that the cause of the Lockman fire was incendiary. Therefore, the 8 months preceding that investigative finding means the government was not investigating an arson crime. They were merely on a fishing expedition investigating a brush fire they properly theorized to have been started by New Year's Eve fireworks. The fact that the 8-acre Lockman fire could have been completely accidental or negligently caused by a firework, which was what was theorized in the search warrant's affidavit, and is clearly not a federal crime, would not justify the issuance of a federal search warrant. Seeking the litany of intrusive materials here, including every single cellular and electronic device possessed by the defendant on a record devoid of evidence of the alleged crime, violates the Fourth Amendment's probable cause command. This is where we're getting into the legal wonkery. This is a motion to suppress evidence that the feds have used. Now, the only evidence that the feds have that Rinderneck committed arson is they have him in the location. They have him in the area of origin of the fire. That's all they have. And they have that based on electronic surveillance. So the GPS on his phone. The thing is, he called 911 a bunch of times immediately after the fire started. Now, to me, it's not necessarily exculpatory, but it's not inculpatory. If you were an arsonist and you were deliberately trying to maliciously cause damage, okay, this is not to say that he may not have started the fire. He may have started accidentally, like with a cigarette. Even though they ruled that out, we know that the reason that they ruled it out is not kosher. Okay, unless someone who knows more about fire than me comes in and tells me that somehow a cigarette fire, once it gets going, is somehow going to look and spread differently than any other source of ignition, short of a flamethrower. Give me a fucking break. The only evidence they have is they have him in the location. Now, if he accidentally started the fire, how would his location necessarily prove otherwise? How can you prove malicious intent? Well, they're going to go even harder on this. Now, they're saying that at the time, even the ATF, not only did they have evidence that this was fireworks, they had 31 witnesses saying that they saw or heard fireworks at the time of the Lockman fire. The ATF had this evidence, even though they're now claiming that, no, nobody ever saw or heard fireworks. They had that evidence, and that was their leading theory when they petitioned for a search warrant of Rinderneck's car and his devices. How can they justify getting that search warrant if they believe that it was fireworks and it was accidental? How could they do that? So that's what the defense attorney is saying. Now, maybe the feds will come back and say, well, we wanted to look for a lighter to see if he had fireworks packaging in his car. Okay, well, that justifies maybe looking at the car, but why his phone? Well, maybe he took a video. Maybe he took a video of himself setting off fireworks. All right, well, that's for the courts to decide whether or not this was unlawfully obtained. Moving on. The defendant's mere presence at the alleged crime scene, Buddha Hill, is unconstitutionally insufficient to establish probable cause. Now, is it suspicious that he was right at the point of origin at the time of the fire? Yes, absolutely. And I think a reasonable person could look at that and go, this guy probably did it. Whether he did it maliciously or he dropped a cigarette, I don't know, man. It is well established in federal law that a person's mere presence at a crime scene or association with suspected criminals without more does not establish probable cause. Like I said, you can't just stack a bunch of facts and count that as evidence, let alone proof. You have to actually corroborate things. You have to use some other thing to triangulate whether or not this means something. The principle that mere presence alone is insufficient to establish probable cause for a search warrant is well established under federal law, particularly in the Ninth Circuit. To illustrate, the Ninth Circuit has emphasized that mere presence with known drug offenders is insufficient to give probable cause for an arrest and cited several precedents to support this principle. Added to this, the defendant called 911. In making this odd claim, the affiant fails to note that it was the defendant, Jonathan Rinderneck, who in fact called the first responders in the first place to notify them of the fire, and then 12 minutes after calling 911 to report the fire, called 911 again to make sure the fire department was responding to the blaze. In performing this good deed, all right, that's just him being a lawyer. But maybe he was trying to perform a good deed. The defendant never once concealed his identity, nor made any effort at any point of reporting the fire to conceal his personal identity or his vehicle that was parked in plain view at the bottom of the trailhead. How this chain of events would counter anything other than the defendant's mere presence at the site of the fire, absent any other evidence whatsoever the defendant participated in a criminal act, belies basic common sense. And this is a fair point. Why would he call 911 if he was deliberately trying to start a fire? Now, one of the other bits of evidence that the feds may have illegally obtained, which is he entered something into ChatGPT. He asked, are you at fault if your cigarette lights a fire? And what the ATF was saying was, well, he only said that to pretend as though there was a more rational explanation for starting the fire, right? So he's like planting fake evidence that it was an accident. So they're claiming, well, he did it maliciously. And then he called 911 immediately. And then he did a fake search for something to make it sound like, oh, I accidentally lit the fire. I mean, is it possible that he was just being kind of a tool and he was just, putting the lighter up to the brush and trying to get it set, and then it actually lit up and then it went faster than he was expecting and it got out? Yeah, that could have absolutely happened. But I think the fact that he called 911 multiple times immediately and from the point of origin and nearby and never tried to hide, he didn't hide his identity or anything like that. To me, it sounds like it was an accident, right? Whether it was a cigarette, like he searched into his ChatGPT, or he was just kind of fucking around and it got out of hand. I don't know, man. They don't have a lot. These affidavits woefully lack any such supportive corroborating information. So just to show you how weak the Fed's case is, here they lay it out. The affidavits notably lack any evidence that the defendant had knowledge of any criminal activity, destroyed any inculpatory evidence of an arson crime, made any incriminating statements to law enforcement or any third party, fled or attempted to flee from law enforcement, participated in any criminal activity, possessed any contraband or evidence, was witnessed to have committed any crime involving arson, was involved in any manner whatsoever with malicious burning of the January 1st Lockman fire, which by the government's own words was, quote, likely caused by fireworks, nor had any involvement, nor was even anywhere near the genesis of the January 7th Palisades Fire, which rather clearly only occurred due to the negligence and failures of others. Because the initial search warrants were based solely on the defendant's mere presence at the location of the Lockman fire without one single shred of an additional incriminating fact, it lacked probable cause and unquestionably violated the defendant's Fourth Amendment rights. Now, if they manage to get this evidence suppressed, the feds have literally nothing. They have nothing. All they have is that he was there based on his GPS. They claim to have a lighter, but who doesn't? I have a lighter. Who doesn't have a lighter? In fact, I always have a lighter in my car. One of the reasons for that is specifically because I've seen things break bad with fires. And I know that sometimes your only chance at surviving is if you light an escape fire, right? So if you're stuck somewhere out in the wilderness and you've got a wildfire burning towards you and you have no way out, your only hope is to light a fire behind you, ahead of the main front of fire, and have an escape path. So that's why I always have a lighter, right? Does that mean that I'm an arsonist? Of course not. DA, law enforcement officers' reference to their training and expertise is generally insufficient to support a finding of probable cause in an affidavit for a search warrant. Now, when you look at the affidavit, they don't have any evidence that he did anything malicious. It's just, in my experience and expertise, arsonists typically do X, Y, and Z. They will typically return to the scene because they want to check on their work. Okay, that guy might have returned to the scene to just see, like, oh, did I really fuck up? How bad did it get? Doesn't mean he's an arsonist. It may mean that he caused the fire. It could also mean that he saw fireworks hit the hill and that was that. And he just wanted to see how it was going. I mean, everybody in the neighborhood came out to check on the fire, right? Who's not going to watch a wildfire in their neighborhood? Courts have consistently held that affidavits must include specific factual details and not rely solely on an officer's subjective beliefs or generalized statements. The Fourth Amendment requires that probable cause be established through the concrete evidence or corroborated information, rather than mere speculation or conclusory assertions based on an officer's, quote, training and experience. Now, I don't want to completely invalidate training and experience because, of course, like I said, we're not going to have 100% proof on any of this stuff, right? Unless we have video of someone starting the fire, whether that's the Lockman Fire or the Palisades Fire. There's gaps we got to fill. And so a lot of it is deductive reasoning. It's eliminating other possible causes. So that way you narrow it down to just one option. But we're never going to have that definitive cause. But I do think that regardless of whether it's fireworks or an accident or it was malicious, at the end of the day, like they were saying, the Palisades Fire itself is only the result of gross negligence on behalf of multiple government agencies. In this case, there's literally not one single shred of direct evidence the defendant could be linked to the crime of arson or either the Lockman or the Palisades Fire. And in fact, there is not one single shred of evidence that the January 1st fire was an arson in the first place. All they have is his location. As noted, all the direct evidence in this case, including the opinions of the fire officials who responded to the January 1st fire, is that the January 1st Lockman Fire was a fire accidentally started by fireworks, and the Palisades Fire that occurred 6 days later was a rekindling of the improperly extinguished earlier fire. There's no question that our post-indictment, the government is now well aware that the Palisades Fire was a completely preventable tragedy that was caused by the outrageous negligence of multiple governmental agencies who ignored the most basic protocol to assure such a tragedy would not occur. Oof. The gross negligence of the fire department in abandoning a visibly smoldering, still burning January 1st, 2025 fire with predicted red flag weather warnings of hurricane force winds is as much to blame as the lack of water resources, manpower, and a bone-dry Santa Ynez reservoir in the distance. The scapegoating and politically motivated finger-pointing to the Uber driver who just happened to be on the hill when the fire started right after midnight on New Year's Eve is arguably one of the most shameful attempts at deflecting civil and criminal responsibility in the nation's history. Superpav says we need more Bridger aerospace drones monitoring SoCal. Well, that's coming, dude. That's absolutely coming. So, what they're hinting at, of course, is the Department of Parks and Rec. They screwed up because in their own policy manual, they say the department's goal is to prevent all unplanned human-caused fires on its land. Given that some unplanned fires will occur, both lightning cause and human cause and fireworks cause, it becomes the department's responsibility. It becomes the department's responsibility to protect human life and to minimize damage to park facilities and resources from wildfires and from all suppression activities. Management actions for wildland fires on department lands involve pre-fire planning, fuel management, public safety measures, fire control support, post-fire evaluation, and rehabilitation. They did not do any of that. And we remember from the testimony that they never came back, right? So in their own manual, the state, Gavin Newsom's agency, they accept responsibility for what happens with a fire after it's been extinguished by the fire department. And how do they do that? With fuel management and post-fire evaluation. You remember this?
Land, right?
Yes, sir. It's the Topanga State Park is their dirt.
Do you remember speaking to anyone from state parks, the state of California, including John Oda?
Yes, sir.
He said, hi, I guess John Oda. I didn't remember at the time. It was real quick. He said, I'm with the, I thought he was a park ranger, but I'm with the State Department. I said, how you doing, John?
I didn't know he wasn't a firefighter.
My initial training was Firefighter 1. I'm forgetting the name, but it's credentialed under a national working group that coordinates the different firefighter certifications across the country.
And he says, I'm here, you need any help with anything? Because we look good right now.
But did you ever hear Ranger Oda tell Chief Mullen that state parks would be patrolling the Lockman Fire area after LAD finished up, after they left? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, because we were all together at that point.
Yeah.
That they'll have state park people looking at this area, going through, state park employees would be going through.
Yeah, and looking for the same thing you guys were looking for, because you don't want a rekindling to occur, right?
Of course.
And he had stated he's going to be here for a couple of days, him and his crew patrolling the area.
And that was on the 1st, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever return to the scene of the fire after the 1st?
No.
Where you guys are at.
So there we have it. Again, it's in their own policy manual that they take responsibility for a fire after it's been put out, and they protect human life and minimize damage to park facilities and resources from the inevitable human-caused fires with post-fire evaluation and rehabilitation. And there they are saying in a sworn deposition that they never evaluated the fire after the first day. They never rehabbed the area. So I look, at this point, whether it was accidental by Jonathan Rinderknecht, deliberate by Jonathan Rinderknecht, or accidental by someone else with fireworks, ultimately this does fall on the state, and the state is absolutely culpable, and they're going to have to pay. They have to, because they take responsibility of this fire once it's been put out. And even though the LAFD, they should have done more thorough mop up, there's a second layer of government that's supposed to take responsibility of this. This is on Topanga State Park. They have an obligation to do their post-fire evaluation, and they didn't do it. Okay? This is now on them. Now, here's the thing. If this were fireworks, and I'm actually blown away by how many people claim they saw and heard fireworks. 31 witnesses said that they saw fireworks that night. It's looking increasingly likely that at the very least, okay, it's more likely that it could be fireworks. It's also very likely that it was Rinderknecht. But whether or not it was accidental, we don't know. And I don't think the government can prove that. Short of a confession, I don't know that the government can even prove that. But regardless, what we know for sure is that he's only responsible for 8 acres, and the state is responsible for the rest. And they even say that in their own policy manual. It's their responsibility. I mean, it's literally, this is tautological. They're saying it is the department's responsibility to protect human life. They are responsible, period. Okay? Couldn't get any more clear. But the thing is, if Rinderknecht gets off, which, like I've been saying, the feds have a weak case. I'm not trying to defend this guy. Like, I don't care if they throw him to the wolves. Like, fuck this guy. But if they can't get beyond reasonable doubt, which it doesn't seem like they have what it takes to get beyond that, who's at fault? Now the fault is so diffused, there's nobody else but the state government to take responsibility for this fire. Nobody else, right? So if this dude gets off the hook, dude, it's all on the state, and it's going to be really bad. How long is it going to take for us to get there? Who knows? But we're in the discovery phase now, so it's going to start getting interesting. Now, before we sign off, just another note. You're starting to see some brushers popping up. And you'll notice with those heat waves, the snowpack in California is gone. You had this little wizard fire in Santee, and look at this thing. Dude, this thing was cooking. This is ripping in March. That's early. And you guys know me. I'm not the panicky type. I never try to say like, oh my God, it's over. Everybody's always trying to do the climate change thing. Like, oh, I can't believe we're having fires this early. Well, you get fires at different times of the year, and it's variable depending on the alignment of the weather. We just so happen to have a heat anomaly that melted all of the snow in the Sierras. This is not good. And throughout the West, in Colorado, there's very little snow. This is going to be potentially a really bad season. Like I always say, all the most experienced guys, what they always say when you ask them to predict how a fire season is going to go, they always say, we'll see. Because it's not any one thing like drought. It's a conspiracy of things that have to get in alignment. Sometimes it depends on timing, right? Sometimes drought can actually reduce your fire season depending on when that drought kicked in. If it kicks in before the growing season, you get less growth and there's less fuel for the fires. If it kicks in after the growing season, that can make all the difference because maybe you get heavy rain that gets a lot of growth and then you get drought, so you get rapid curing of that growth. That can be the worst combination. And ultimately, look, if you end up getting some monsoonal moisture throughout the summer, you get a temperate summer. You don't really get any major ignitions in the first place. Who knows? But I will say, this is an indicator. I remember in 2020, it was the eponymously named, no, I shouldn't say that because I didn't cause it, but there was a fire in Riverside called the Man Fire that burned up a couple homes, and I believe it was in February. I remember seeing that fire pop up, and I was like, ooh, this is a harbinger of things to come. This thing is cooking too hot for this early in the year. And this fire in Santee reminds me of the Man Fire in 2020. And we all know how 2020 ended up. Now, again, it took an anomalous lightning bust combined with gnarly outflow winds in order for 2020 to become 2020. So again, we don't know if we're going to get that kind of alignment, but the ingredients are there for a very bad fire season. So it is past time for you to start getting rid of brush. You need to start early. Don't wait, because all it takes is just a few acres if it starts in the wrong place and your house is gone. So clear your brush, be ready to go, be ready to receive fire. It's inevitable. It's coming for you guys. All right, let me check the chat. Caruso was glazing Kitahara on Twitter the other day. I saw that. Rick Caruso, I don't know what he's doing going to a fire station. It's like he's running for office without running for office. It's very weird. And why hasn't he endorsed Spencer Pratt yet? I may have some clues as to why that is, but it's a good question. All that said, Kitahara, by all metrics, is a great firefighter. In 2020, he was LAFD's Firefighter of the Year. He's a very good dude. He was very upset when his depositions came out because he felt he had a bunch of people hitting him up saying like, hey man, what the fuck did you guys do? And so he was taking it like he got all the blame laid on him. Like it was his fault that they left early. And it wasn't his fault. He wasn't the guy who was telling everyone to wrap up their hoses. And that wasn't presented in his testimony. Like you saw, the testimony that was presented was him saying, validating that the state told them they would take over the fire. That's exculpatory, not inculpatory, right? So I don't know why he's pissed off, but I wonder if Caruso went out there to try to smooth things out with him. But at the end of the day, Scott Pike is the ultimate hero in the department because he was the one who had the balls to speak up. And as it turns out, there was somebody else, and I'll get into this at another time, but there was somebody else who said in one of the depositions that we haven't presented. They said that they told Battalion Chief Garcia, that it was a bad idea to roll up the hoses. So now we have more than just Scott Pike. There were two guys saying it, and there's more that's going to be coming out. So in due time. Dave Mills says, come to California to get some smoke. Well, brother, that may be happening. When am I coming out? I am coming out to California in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. I'll be out there. That's a little too early for fire season, but I will be out there at the end of this month. I will be out there in June. And depending on some other things that get in alignment, who knows, I might be out there even more. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. Donia says, come to LA and train us homeowners. You should bug the cunning Phil Cunningham to do that. He knows more about this. He's forgotten more about fire than I'll ever know. Phil Cunningham says, wet then dry is worse than extended dry. That is 100% correct. And that's important to remember. It's the timing, the order of things that matters more than any one thing. Okay. And right now, we have the wrong order of things. Okay. If you want a muted fire season, things are not looking good because there was a ton of moisture. There was enough moisture to get a lot of growth, but that moisture went away very quickly and it's too early. And the thing is that snowpack that should be melting into June and July, which is just going to keep like sprinkling water into the soils below to sort of keep replenishing the fuel moisture and prolonging that spring, prolonging that green up. Well, that's now gone. So going into May and June, there's nothing that's going to be watering the plants out in the forests. So it's like, this could be really bad. And from what I'm seeing, it looks like a lot of grasses are already cured. There can still be a secondary green up, but some of that rain that's been predicted to move in kind of didn't materialize. California is not looking promising. And it's not just California. Colorado looks really bad. New Mexico doesn't look good. Arizona does not look good. This could be a very bad fire season. We'll see. Like we always say. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me. I don't do the April Fool's shit. So, yeah, everything that I said today was true. Right? I trust me. I don't do April Fools. I think that's bullshit. We have enough bullshit on the internet. I don't want to contribute to that. So all I'm going to do is ever shoot you straight. Thanks for joining me, guys. Remember, in this dystopian world of AI and shitty documentarians who are trying to push fake news and potentially Democrat lawyers who are trying to sow misinformation so that way Gavin Newsom gets off the hook, the only way to prove you're human is to do it live. All right. It's not good night. It's good afternoon, good evening, and good